So I'd like to start off by introducing our first speaker, who is Dr. Maryah Fram. Dr. Maryah Stella Fram has a Master of Social Work and a PhD, is Associate Professor of Social Work at the University of South Carolina. Her research focuses on child food insecurity and hunger, child and family poverty, and her early child education and care. Recent projects have been funded by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the United States Department of Agriculture, and the Nord Family Foundation. She teaches undergraduate, master's, and doctoral students primarily in the areas of social policy, human behavior in the social environment, and social theories of inequality. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Maryah Stella Fram to the stage.
My clicker. Before I start, let me know, how does it work? Do I just push the middle button? Okay, great. Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me a chance to talk with you today. It's a huge privilege and an honor to get to share with you a little bit about what I have learned over the years about kids and hunger. And I'm going to talk some about what I learned, and I'm going to suggest some things that I think we can all do as a community and that you can do as young people to help address a really serious problem. But mostly I'm just hoping to get you thinking differently. Because the biggest thing I have learned is that we do not yet have real solutions to a very solvable problem. And so what that means to me is that as much as my work matters and is important, pretty soon I'm going to hand things over to a generation in which you guys are going to have to be the innovators and the thinkers and the doers to solve the problem that we're dealing with. So I'm a social work professor at USC, and that means I spend most of my time doing research, sitting in my office behind a computer, doing statistical analyses on big, huge data sets, trying to figure out the answers to really messy problems, like why the heck is there so much poverty in such a rich country? And I love my work, and I'm good at my work, and I get these answers that are all big numbers. And there's a real risk in big numbers. They can feel so big that we start feeling like we can't do anything in the face of them. And I'm going to give you one big number. Doesn't look like a number yet, but I'll put it up. We know that in South Carolina, more than 1 out of every 4 children lives in a household where they don't always have enough to eat. Right here in South Carolina. So last year, I'm sorry you can't see that gray, it was over 270,000 children in our state who are what we call food insecure. That doesn't mean that they're hungry every day, but it means that at least sometime in the last month, their family worried that they wouldn't be able to afford to buy enough food for everyone to have enough to eat. So they're insecure about having enough food. When I look at that number, I feel scared, and I don't know how to solve that problem, because there's a lot of people and I can't feed them all, no matter how much of my money I spend, or I can cook, or I can do whatever. I can donate canned goods. I can't solve that number on my own. And then about 8 years ago, I had this great opportunity to get inside that number in a way that's really helped me think differently. I got a small grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to go with some of my colleagues and get out of my office and to go talk to kids, some of those 270,000 of them and their parents, and find out what their lives were like. So I was going on my first interview, and I'm driving along, and this is before I had smartphones, so I had my directions printed out, and I'm going to someplace near Charleston. I don't know Charleston very well. And so I'm driving along, and I'm thinking, wow, this neighborhood looks kind of a lot like the neighborhoods near where I live. I bet the next corner I'll turn, and maybe 1 block over, that's where I'll hit the poor neighborhood, right? Because I'm going to go talk to somebody who I knew couldn't feed her child all the time. So I'm waiting to hit the poor neighborhood. And it never happened. I found myself welcomed into the home of a woman who looked a lot like me, in a suburban neighborhood that looked a lot like mine, or probably some of yours. And I got inside and I sat down with her. And what she shared with me was that for the last 2 years, she and her 11-year-old son had been having a really hard time. She had finally gotten a divorce from a man who was violent to her. She was really glad to be out of that relationship. But even though he was paying some child support, she couldn't afford to feed him all the time. And so what she did most nights, because she said, good moms sit down and they have dinner with their child every day. So she would sit down, but she wouldn't eat very much. She'd eat a couple bites, and she'd drink a lot of water, because she didn't have enough food for her and for him. But she didn't want him to know, because he's 11. He shouldn't be worrying about this. So I'll just not eat, it'll be okay. So she went off and let me talk to her son. What a privilege to have someone to trust you to sit and talk to their child in their home. And this little boy, I said, well, what's it like in your house at dinner time? And he looks down the hall to where his mom had gone to make sure she couldn't hear. And he leaned in and he whispered, mostly I don't eat very much because my mom doesn't eat anything, and I'm real worried about her. So I was breaking my heart, and I was driving home. And at that time, I had an 11-year-old at my house, and I'm driving home, and I'm thinking, their lives are really different than what I could count on in my life. And yet this little boy, he looked like the kids who come and play at my house. He dressed the same. He talked the same. I would never have known that they are suffering without enough food in their home. So do a thought experiment with me for a moment. I want you to picture the places you have been since you got up yesterday morning. I bet maybe you stopped by Target, maybe you went to the gas station, the grocery store, you went to a friend's house, maybe you went out and got something at Panera. Statistically, 1 in 4 kids don't have enough to eat. You have met, talked to, driven by, encountered some child who looks like you, but they're worried about whether they're going to eat tonight. So they might have been in that Target line talking to their mom, but they were really worrying, if we buy this food, will we be able to pay our power bill next month? Or they were arguing in the backseat of the car with their little sister driving by you the other way. And they were thinking in their mind, if I eat dinner tonight, will my sister be so hungry she can't sleep? You have encountered every day of your lives kids who look like you, but they don't have enough to eat. I'm going to share with you some of the things that those children shared with me so that you know what their lives are like. I was talking to a little girl, she was in middle school, and I asked her, what's it like when there's not enough food in your house? Because she told me we run out sometimes. And she was really hard. And I said, well, how do you know that's coming? And she told me that she watches very carefully to notice when food's getting low. She said, it's not so much that my parents tell me, but she said, you can see it in people's expressions. They don't have a happy face, my mom and dad. They don't have a sad face. They have an empty face. And she knew when her mom's face started to look real empty, that meant I better not eat so much tonight. And it meant I better not cause any trouble, don't cause any stress, because things are hard enough and they just can't take anymore. I talked to a high school boy, and I put this slide on a picture of a football field, and it's not his football field, I just pulled it off the internet. But I'm betting a lot of you either play football, you know someone plays football, it's important in your life. It was important in this young man's life. He goes to a really good suburban school in the upstate. He was the starter of the football team, and he was about to quit football. And the reason was this. He gets about 1 meal a day most days. And so he told me he goes to bed, he's mad, he just goes to sleep to get away from the hunger. That's all he can do. And he knows that the only way his life will be different in the future than what his life is now is if he goes to college. But if he doesn't have enough to eat, he can't both have the energy to play football and stay up and study. So he had to quit the football team so he could use his food energy to study, so he could go to college. This quote is from a little girl. I talked to kids from age 7 to 17. And a little 7-year-old girl who told me, it's hard when we only have like oodles and noodles to eat, macaroni and cheese for the last 2 weeks of the month. But the worst thing is when my mom sends me over to my friend's house to borrow stuff because I get real embarrassed because I have to go every couple of days. Now that some of you, your mom's been baking cookies or your dad's been baking cookies and they run out of eggs or sugar and they send you next door, you borrow a cup of sugar. That's not what this is. This is every couple of days. And she knows that her neighbors know that she's there because her mom can't afford to feed her. And she's embarrassed. And she was about 8 years old, I think. And then we talked to a young man who in his community, everyone runs out of food around the same time every month. And their mom is working, in his family, his mom is working a full-time job and then a couple of part-time jobs. She's doing everything she can. And so the only way that his little brother and sister are going to have enough to eat is if he comes with some money. So he and his friends, when they all start to run out of money, they get together to try to make some money. And they were very proud. So we don't ever sell drugs. We don't do anything like that. We'd go try to cut some grass. But sometimes they can't get enough money that way. So I'm listening to this young man talk, and I couldn't have possibly guessed what he'd say next. He said, so sometimes we put up money on fights and do some dog fights. Now, y'all don't know me, but I'm an animal rights person. I'm a vegetarian. I don't believe in fighting anybody or anything, much less dogs. And I thought, if I had seen on my nightly news a bunch of teenagers busted for dog fighting in the upstate, I would have thought, what horrible people. I would never have thought. These are young people who are trying to find any way they can to have enough food to eat. So overall, when we talk to kids, we learn that food insecurity, faced by kids who look like you, kids you encounter every day, has a lot of problems that go beyond feeling just hungry. They feel tired and scared. They feel responsible in ways that little kids should not. They feel hopeless. Because I bet you have missed a meal once and you felt crabby and hungry and lightheaded, right? That's how their whole life has been. And they aren't sure it will ever change. They also feel really different and embarrassed. Because I know that big number. It's 1 in 4 kids. But they're trying to keep that secret. And their parents are trying to keep that secret. And so they think it's just them. And that feels real scary and real alone. So, why is it happening? The biggest reason that kids don't have enough to eat in this country is because their parents can't earn enough money, even though they're mostly working full-time. Most people who are poor in America work as hard as everybody else, but they don't make enough money. A really brilliant colleague of mine, Diana Pierce, went, and she's gone to almost every county in the country, and calculated, based on what we know, not her guess about what it costs, but really good, hard data that the federal government tells us, this is what it costs just to have a basic standard of living. To rent a safe apartment, not a nice one, just a safe one, to have enough food to put on the table, to have a car that's decent enough to get you to your job. That mom I interviewed with the little boy, the least that they needed to pay their bills for those 2 people, they lived here in Richland County, was $14.95 an hour. If she's working full-time every week, all year. That doesn't sound like a lot, right? $14.94 an hour. Except that the minimum wage here in South Carolina is barely half that. Now, I bet you might have heard, well, nobody really makes the minimum wage, right? It's the minimum. Well, that's kind of true, but it's kind of not true. About 5% of people in South Carolina actually earn the minimum wage, but almost half of wage earners are really close to the minimum wage. So if you look at the 10 most frequent occupations, the jobs that hold the most people, only one of them, only registered nurses, make enough that that mom could have taken care of her kid and had enough money to buy enough food. Just one. And the median wage, so if I split all the earners in the state, line them all up from the least earning to the most and drew a line in the middle, half of all the workers earn less than $15 an hour in the state of South Carolina. So that's a big and serious problem. It is the main reason why people can't feed their kids. And I bet that even if you didn't know any of what I've told you so far, you know that there are hungry kids and families. Because in this very school, and probably in your church, or in your Boy Scout or Girl Scout troop, you collect food for people, right? You do canned food drives. And I want to tell you a couple of things about that. The first one is keep doing it. There are people who the only way they don't go hungry for the last week to 2 weeks of the month is that they go to Harvest Hope and they get a bag of food. But I also want to tell you that it's a horrible solution for the long term. Because what that means is somebody standing in line at Harvest Hope every month. Maybe they go to Harvest Hope one time and they go to another food pantry 2 weeks later. They're standing in line for a couple of hours. But people look at them and they know that they're there because they're not able to feed their kids. And they ask them questions that are embarrassing. And it's humiliating. And the food they get is not the food that's necessarily right for them. So it's not a long-term solution, but keep donating food. Here's the other thing. The food you donate is probably the only meal somebody will have today. So don't go in your cupboard and grab out the thing that you bought and then you didn't want to eat, and somebody else should be grateful to have it. That's not the right way to think about this. You have the privilege to eat whatever you want. If you're helping somebody else, Give them the one meal you would want if that was the only meal you were going to get today. Right? There's other things you can do. You have choices about where you shop. I put up here the average wages of entry-level workers at a bunch of places where you might get your food. If you shop at Kroger, the person who's checking out your groceries is making about $8.30 an hour. If you go up the road to Whole Foods, you're making $11.06 an hour. And that doesn't sound much, $8.30, $11.06. I think it's $3, right? You can't even get your Frappuccino for that difference. Except that over a month for a full-time worker, Whole Foods, you make another $466 in just 1 month. That's your whole grocery budget. So if you are privileged enough to live in a household where you could choose where to shop, shop somewhere where the person who waits on you, who helps you, can then take food home to feed their kids decently. But I want to say just 2 more things to y'all before I quit. And one of them is that perhaps the biggest thing that you as young people can do around kids and hunger right now in your lives is that you can think about all the ways that food is part of your world. Think about when you have a birthday and you have a special meal and invite people over. Think about when you've had a bad day at school and you grab your friend and say, let's go to Starbucks and get a treat. Or when you have a late night study session at Panera, or you order pizza. Food is really important in your world. Maybe not here at Hammond if you're a Hammond student, but probably. Certainly in your neighborhood. And absolutely when you go out into the world of college and beyond. There will be somebody who, when you say, hey, you want to go hang out at Panera and study tonight? Will say, oh, no, I'm okay. I study better alone. Not because they don't want to study with you, but because they can't afford to eat at Panera with you. And so the biggest thing you can do right now as young people, even if you can't tell your mom where to shop for groceries, even if you don't control what you put in the canned food drive, and you have no control over wage policy yet, but hopefully someday some of you will, right now you can make sure that you reach out to people who are different than you and people who you think are a lot like you without assuming that because you can afford food in a certain way, they can. Because that's how you'll make them feel less alone and less different and less embarrassed. That doesn't mean you should say to them, oh, here, let me buy your lunch for you. That would make it worse. So you think creatively, how can you truly be inclusive in a world where 1 out of 4 people like you can't afford enough food, much less all the extras and the fun stuff that food does in your life? And then my very last slide is blank. Because as I said to you at the beginning, we don't have all the real solutions yet. I learned about child food insecurity about 8 years ago. I was studying child poverty. I'd never heard of food insecurity. When I thought hungry kids, I thought starving children in Africa. I'm going to be really honest about it. I had no clue. But when I found out what I have found out about the kids in my community around me, it has made me enraged that in a country this rich, children go hungry. And I hope that as you go into the world and think about that, it awakens just a little bit of that rage in you, because we need some really good new solutions. And it's going to take people like you all who are going to go be leaders, to be the thinkers who come up with the solutions so this problem can be solved going forward. Thank you so much for an opportunity to talk today.
Thank you, Dr. Fram, for speaking with us today and for giving us something new to speak out that I'm sure many of us weren't aware of, and definitely something to think of when we think of service projects and initiatives going forward in the future, and just as we look for solutions that we're all invested in fixing.